Okay, we are going to get right into this today. I am here with Danielle Liss of Businessese. How are you, Danielle?
I am great and I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I'm so excited to have you here. Danielle and I actually had a chance to both speak at Food Entrepreneur Summit, and then since we had so many similarities, ended up connecting again after that. Danielle, can you give us your background? What did you do beforehand, or what do you still do?
Sure. I am a lawyer and I focus primarily on the influencer marketing space and helping online business owners with the legal side of their business. After law school, I went into private practice, and I know this is such a rare story for lawyers. I hated it. Like, I was not meant for private practice at all. It was too contentious. I was doing construction litigation, which for anybody who knows me knows that's not a good fit for like just the way my mind works. And I had started a blog when I was in law school. I won't lie, it's because I was bored in class. So I had been blogging since 2004, knew the space really well. And I ended up starting to speak at a lot of conferences, particularly at Bloggy Boot Camp, if you remember those with SITs. And so I did a lot of talks on blog law just to try to make contracts a little more accessible, because that's when influencer marketing was really at its infancy. So brands didn't know how to navigate it, and influencers had no idea how to navigate it. Because for most people, let's face it, in the space, this tends to start out as a hobby. Most people, now we see it a little bit more where people are like, I'm going to start this straight up day one as a business. But for many years, I started this as a hobby because I wanted to talk to other moms. I started it as a hobby because I like to craft, or whatever the case might be. And in my case, it was just because I like to talk. And there are a lot of people I think that are like that. So after I wanted to leave private practice, and I think it was 2010, in that summer, I met my now former business partner, Kelly Alexa from Fitfluential. I met her on Twitter, and we connected at a conference. At that time, she had an idea percolating that she kept talking about, that she wanted to start Fitfluential. It didn't have a name. It didn't have anything at that point. And the next year, she launched the company, and I was on the board of advisors, and then my role grew. And I eventually became Chief Marketing Officer and General Counsel for Fitfluential, which is an influencer network focused on health and wellness campaigns. So after about, I think, 5 or 6 months, we were ready for everybody to kind of come on full time. So I left private practice to do that full time. I stayed there through the end of 2015. And in early 2015, the issue for me with working for an influencer network, it was 24/7, nonstop craziness, because I was the one who, as soon as sales was done, I was basically running the campaign from start to finish. So from as soon as it came through, I was the one dealing with the clients, managing the campaign, selecting the influencers, doing the budgets, all the way through until campaign close with the reporting. So it was just nonstop. I remember before I left, I was emailing people back and forth on Thanksgiving Day trying to coordinate campaign deliverables. So it was just, I needed a break, honestly. And I had a young child. So it was one of those things where I was like, what else am I going to do? So I met my now business partner, Jamie Lieberman. And some people may know Jamie as the former director of operations for Type A Parent. She worked a lot with the conference and with their network. And we had both been sitting on a really similar business idea. And we met at a conference. And that day, it was in Vegas, and which is where I'm from. We got quickie business married that day because, and I always say that, and we always joke about it, but we really did. We were doing a roundtable on legal issues, and this was at one of the Type A conferences. There were other roundtables that were on things like grow your Instagram following, how to make beautiful pinnable images. It was weird because nobody was at the legal table, and because people that's not viewed as, one of the sexy topics to talk about. So we were talking, and that's when we were like, we need to explore this. And that conference, that conversation at that table is what turned into Businessese. And our goal at Businessese is to help influencers and other online business owners, because let's face it, most of the time, an influencer is not just an influencer. Most of the time, those businesses grow into something more. So we really do treat our influencers as true online business owners, because that's what you are. And our goal there is to help people with some of those back office management things that people don't want to deal with, like their legal aspects, campaign reporting, how to come up with their pricing, things like that. That is our goal. at Businessese is to help people navigate that. Then if they need help with actual legal work where they need a lawyer to come in and draft custom contracts or to help them negotiate and review things, we have a secondary business, which is our law firm, #legal. So we handle both sides of things. But so Businessese is primarily the DIY forms. And then if people need custom work, they come to us at #legal and we can help there.
Okay. Yes. So the first thing I have to say is that I love the fact that you brought up Bloggy Bootcamp because that was one of my first conferences.
I loved it.
Me too. I met so many amazing people that I now still continue to work with because of that conference. I love what they put together.
I really feel like Tiffany and Fran had something extremely magical in those conferences. And the thing that I loved about it, I'm a huge introvert. I'm a talker, as you can see, but I'm also extremely shy in social settings.
Yes.
So what I really liked about it is that you spent the morning at assigned tables. So you were kind of forced to interact, but it wasn't like that awkward, like you walk into a networking event and you have to find the people you're going to talk to. Like they just did it. They did the round robin seating and the topics were always good. I think I spoke at 5 of those over the years. And it was I am still grateful to this day to Tiffany because she's the one who gave me my first speaking engagement ever. And that's when I really started to develop such a passion for this. So when we went and started the new businesses, I sent Tiffany a thank you email just to say, hey, I don't know if you realized like the impact that you had, but you really did. And just thank you for giving me that chance so many years ago when I had zero speaking experience other than a courtroom.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That was the first conference that I spoke at way back when.
Which one?
It was I want to say it was in Atlanta, actually.
Do Atlanta.
Okay. And I also did my first one was when I went to, it was in Texas. I want to say it might have been in Houston or something like that. And that was when, I can't remember, Danielle, another Danielle
Wiley.
Yes. Spoke about saying no and letting go and all these different things. And at that time, I was sitting at that conference, a hobby blogger, wanting it to turn into a business, wanting to leave teaching because I felt like this just wasn't the right place. And I remember like really connecting at that point. And then when I went to Atlanta, I walked up to Tiffany in tears to tell her that I was resigning from my teaching position. And I felt it was largely because of what was spoken at that conference in Texas.
I think that they have impacted so many people's lives in ways that they probably don't begin to know. And I just really appreciate everything that they did and still continue to do to help people grow those online businesses. I really feel like they are one of the biggest steps in going from hobby to business. And they have always preached that. Always, always, always treat yourself like a business. I remember that from the very first time I saw, I think the first one I did was in St. George in Utah, but the first one that I spoke at was in San Diego. And I remember Lisa Leonard talking about this new thing that she had joined called Pinterest. And it's funny because I learned so much about the industry just from those events. And I really, they are truly magical with the community that they created there.
Yes. No, I definitely agree. And the fact that they talk about it like a business. So, and that I think is one of the areas in which a lot of times my audience will struggle is I've had people come on that have talked about business planning. Marnie Craycroft was on already and has spoken about that. So let's talk a little bit about the legal side of things. As far as your online business, what would you state is the most important thing that you need to have when you are first starting online legal-wise?
I think that there's probably 2 things that I think are extremely important. And number 1 is know your business entity. I think for a lot of people, that does mean creating an LLC for your business and treating everything separately from your personal assets. It doesn't always mean that, but if you aren't doing it and you're treating yourself as a sole proprietorship, or if you're working with someone else and you're treating yourself as a partnership, what I want you to do is know your business format and know what you can and can't do. Know what is and is not protected, because that is really, I think it's just important because, again, if you want to treat yourself like a business, be a business. Don't have a business checking account, have, a business PayPal. Make sure that you know what you're doing because let's just face it, taxes. Make sure that you have, and 'tis the season for that, right? For us all to be thinking about it. So I think that is really important. The second thing is, if you are making money, if money is changing hands, and this can be in a lot of different circumstances, for your audience, it's I'm sure going to be brand related or network related. Or if you are working with independent contractors on your own site, like a VA, a content creator, contributor, whatever the case might be, have contracts. What has happened so much in the industry because so many people start out as hobbyists and not treating themselves as a business from the get-go, we too frequently enter into handshake deals. And it can get a little bit hairy if something goes wrong. And I don't like to tell people, I don't like fear-based marketing. I don't like to say, if you don't do this, you're going to get sued, because 9 times out of 10, you probably won't get sued. However, what's going to happen in that one circumstance where something does happen? What's going to happen if you don't get everything straightened out with your brand beforehand? I can't tell you how many times I've had people come to me and say, the brand and I talked, we negotiated this out. Then I got their contract and it said that I had to include do follow links. I don't do follow links. And I was like, well, here's the thing. You don't have to sign exactly what was put in front of you. You need to negotiate that and tell them, or you need to walk away. So that's been a really important conversation point for us when we're talking to influencers. Is you have to know, number one, you have to get a contract. And number two, you have to have some type of base understanding of those contract terms so that you know what you're signing. And then along with that, we do not ever stop preaching about negotiation. Don't be afraid to negotiate for yourself. I think there was a time where people were really afraid to go back and ask for something different in a contract because they felt that if I ask for a change, the brand is going to say, you know what, too much work, don't want to deal with you. We're just going to pick somebody else. And there may have been a time where that was the case because it may have been because everybody was learning. Like I said, like in the 2000, probably 11 to 12 range, that may have been an issue. Right now, I don't think it's that uncommon because I can tell you in every other type of business, it is extremely unusual for somebody to hand you a contract and you say, cool, and you sign it. I don't see any other area of business where there aren't back and forth negotiations that take a little bit of time. And I'm not saying it's got to be like a 5-month process. That's not the case for most campaigns. But don't be afraid to ask for something, particularly if it doesn't match what you have seen. So those are the things that I think are the most important for bloggers, because that really is you signing those legal rights for your business. That is critical to make sure that you have that understanding.
I think the fact that you say that you have to have a contract too is really important because all too often we do kind of go on things on handshakes and we think that we do that with other bloggers, so it's okay. But then when you're moving forward with a brand, you got to get that contract in place. And the do follow links, it's one of the biggest questions I think I get asked is the difference between do follow, don't follow. Why can't I have it? And just have to know this information before you can get into it. Otherwise, you're going to have an issue.
And even just why those things are important. The FTC, oh my goodness. I remember going to a conference that was aimed, at a kind of different area. And someone asked, because the person who was presenting was a lawyer who was talking about the FTC. And they said to him, because he did primarily FTC defense. So when the FTC actually comes after you, he's the one who's kind of helping you out with that process. And someone asked, well, when the FTC comes after you, what is a good result? And he's like, typically the FTC isn't going to pursue you unless they know they have a really strong case. Like they're not going to just come after you to be like, it's just a warning this time. Like they are only going to do it if they know something's there. And he said that a good result for his clients was a $50,000 fine.
Oh my goodness.
How many influencers do you know who can afford that? To me, it is just not worth it to not know what you're doing and to not disclose. The disclosure thing just blows my mind because, oh my gosh, just say the relationship. But then also, you need to know why you have to, because the FTC requires it. I see people all the time who will be like, well, Kim Kardashian didn't do it on this thing. Celebrities are held to a slightly different standard because people know it's an advertisement kind of thing. Like there's the FTC we could talk about for hours. So I'm not going to belabor that point. But I think that it's just important for people to know why those things are important when you're talking to the brand. And if a brand is like, no, we think that that's going to turn our audience off, that's when you say, first of all, I don't think it turns the audience off if a disclosure is done well. And second of all, that's your chance to educate them. I'm a big believer that we are the number one expert on our own audiences. And it's up to us to kind of work with those brands and tell them, no, don't. My audience is accustomed to sponsored content because I present it well and I don't lose my voice and it still stays authentic. So it's not something that needs to feel scary to stick up for yourself because no one knows your audience better than you do.
Absolutely. So now a lot of my audience is used to primarily working with the networks. And I think that's part of the reason why when it comes to a contract, they freak out because they haven't ordinarily needed to do that. So when you are working with a network, what do you think is the most important things to do? Because I think a lot of times we join these networks and we don't look into what the terms are. You and I have had a conversation about this previously. So what should we be looking at when we sign up with a network?
The number one things that you need to know, and I think this goes really for most contracts, you need to know what your payment terms are. So you need to know when you're going to get paid. That's a huge piece of contention in the blogger world. Like I heard somebody who said, I did this and I haven't gotten paid yet. How long has it been? About 15 days. Okay, that network takes about 60 days to pay. So you don't need that level of anxiety if you just know what your terms say. Like you can kind of prepare for that in your business planning to make sure that you know when the income's actually going to be coming through. The other things that I think are really, really important, particularly right now, I think this is one of the hottest topics in the contracts that we review, is the ownership of the deliverables. And a lot of networks make this pretty standard that you, as the influencer, as the content creator, retain all of your copyright rights. They get a license to then do what they want. The question is, what can they do with it? So you need to know what that license means and what they are allowed to do with your stuff. Because I've had people come to me and say, I did this campaign and now suddenly they're using my image in a print ad. First question I'm going to ask you every single time, what did your contract say? Half of the time I hear, I don't know, if they had a contract and they just may not know. So it really comes down to what is the brand allowed to do with that content at the end of the day? I think that, and for the networks, because remember, the networks are really just agencies who are kind of the middleman. They are working directly with the brand and finding the influencers that fit the overall campaign. So they are doing this on a much larger scale. So you may be one of 10, 20, 50, 100 people who are working on the same campaign. There's not usually as much room to negotiate with the networks because the network has already negotiated on behalf of the brand. So a lot of times if you are working with a network and if you don't want them to own your content or be able to use your content, that may be a campaign that you have to pass on because that may not be negotiable. But the key for you is to know who owns things, when you're going to get paid. And also the other thing I think is really important is exclusivity. Because if there is any type of exclusivity that is going to prevent you from doing other types of brand work, you need to know exactly what's covered there.
Now, how long would you say the negotiation with a network actually takes from start to finish as far as the terms that you talked about? You touched on that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Do you mean with the brands, what they do?
Yes, so the brands with the network, yes.
It can take, I have had campaigns that I seriously turned around in 2 weeks. I have had campaigns that took months upon months of planning. I think that it depends on the company that you are working with and what it is you'll be doing. I often find that the negotiation cycle is shorter if it's based around a launch. So like a specific product that they want highlighted, or it may be a tighter time frame around the holidays because in fourth quarter, a lot of places realize not even just that they want the traffic. They realize that they've got marketing spend that's still available. They have budget left over. So they're saying, we need to spend this, which is great for us, right? It's great for the influencer side. So it's really important to keep in mind that some of the things may have been negotiated, some of them, months in advance. Like I know that fourth quarter campaigns typically started for us, I would say, a lot of them in August to September, so that we were then in the influencer selection stage in October to plan posts for November and December. But there were others, like let's say somebody had a product release coming in 2 weeks and they decided they wanted to do this in conjunction with their PR. They might be the fastest turnaround you've ever seen. Those were not my favorites. They were, there's the marathon and the sprint. They were the sprint and we sprinted hard.
Right. And I think that that's a lot of the questions. The reason I ask that is because a lot of times I will get bloggers that will say to me, well, when I work on a campaign through a network, I get an email and there's a turnaround of 2 weeks and it's done, one and done. But now that they're trying to work with the brands themselves, it takes a little bit longer because they're doing that piece of negotiation.
What I tell people is I view there as being a hierarchy in terms of how much you get paid, depending upon where you are going through. I feel that networks are typically at the lowest level in terms of payment because they're doing everything for you. You are creating content. The end. And depending on what you're doing, you may have to do a little bit of reporting. You'll review your contract with the network, sure. But the best part about that is they're handling all of it from A to Z for you, including the reporting, including the insights, all of it. If you are doing it from pitch to close, as we say, you're doing, I think that's really when people realize how much work the networks do. You're doing a whole lot more just overall. You are sending the pitch. You are doing all the negotiations. You're doing probably a lot more with contracts, and you're doing that campaign close reporting. It's so much more than just content creation. And that's why I always tell people you need to have different prices for the things that you're doing based on that. So if you're working direct with brand or direct with agency, I think agency tends to come in somewhere between direct to brand and network in terms of pricing. But your pricing should be a lot different for when you're working directly with a brand because you're doing more. So you should be compensated accordingly for that.
Agreed. That is definitely something that I teach is in my course working with brands is that you have to have that different pricing, and it should also be, I think, often be different based upon the type of brand and what it is that you're being asked to do for them.
And during the time of year. Honestly, I think that pricing should be cyclical, and that can also depend on what kind of niche you're in, because for a lot of people, Q1 slows down a little bit. Unless you're in the fitness and food space, then because of new year, new you, everything picks up. So Q4 is typically busiest for everybody. And I recommend raising your rates in Q4 because there is more work to be had. Brands are trying to get that marketing spend. They're trying to boost those holiday sales. That's when it's a good time to hike the rates up a little bit. And I'm not saying like double and triple. That's totally going to be dependent upon your performance, et cetera. But what you may need to do, because often I think that Q2 is a typically slow time because it's before back to school, it's before holiday, and it's just summer is slower in terms of traffic for most people. That's when you may want to decrease your rates and then take a look. Because I think that a lot of times people are like, this is my rate, period. And they aren't realizing that the source of your campaign should matter. And, you know, the things you have to negotiate for should matter. If you have exclusivity, that should, you know, change the price. So I think there's a whole lot of different things that go into it that you can negotiate for.
And what would you say the most important thing to look for in your contract when you're working directly with the brand would be? Obviously do follow, no follow links. It's first and foremost, but after that.
I think that the same things that you want to look for in your network brands. I think, first of all, the thing that you want to do when you are working direct with the brand, you need to make sure that everything matches what your conversation had. So make sure there's no surprises, because unfortunately what can happen is you've negotiated this entire campaign and you're like, sweet. And then exclusivity was never contemplated for that. You were pitching them something that didn't have exclusivity, but then you get that contract and it says this is exclusive. And you're like, the way that I always tell people to handle that in negotiations is to say, we weren't contemplating exclusivity when we discussed this. That does impact the pricing. Here's what that price would be with the exclusivity. So, and then that's up to them to make the decision as to whether or not they want to put the additional budget toward that exclusivity, how important it is to them. But I think that the biggest, most important thing right now really is the ownership of those deliverables. I hear a lot of conversations, and this is something that I think has really been a trend in the past year or two, is deleting content. And I think that that has happened a lot more because of Instagram. And I hear so many people who are like, well, years past, I can delete it. And I'm like, I don't know where that like sort of benchmark came from. I'm sure it was a Facebook group somewhere where somebody said, oh, no, you can totally do it after a year.
Right.
But if you gave the brand a license to that content that doesn't expire, you can't take that away from them without their permission. So you need to really take a look and just know what you can and can't do, because there are people who will strip all references of sponsorship because they want to promote it as a different type of evergreen post. That can be a little bit hairy just in terms of what you can do in terms of the ownership. So I think that's like, to me, that and payment terms and making sure that the deliverables match up to what your conversation was from that pitch, that's really the most important key. That contract should reflect exactly what your discussions held. It shouldn't have surprises. And if it did have a surprise, that's a second conversation that you need to have. Don't always expect it to be something that you just kind of glance at and then sign. You should always be reading those contracts really thoroughly. And look, I get it. Reading through an indemnity provision or confidentiality provision can kind of make your eyes glaze over a little bit, but make sure you just, for the most part, you understand what it says. Like, I see so many people in Facebook groups talking about their campaigns and getting really into specifics. And I just wonder to myself, I know that brand well enough to know that they have a pretty thorough confidentiality provision. So just be cautious, because if you're not supposed to be talking about something, you really want to make sure you're not, because everybody can screenshot something. Just be careful. You don't want to ruin a brand relationship because you got overly chatty in a Facebook group. Like, that to me is just, that's never going to be worth it.
Right. No, absolutely. So I initially reached out to you because one of the areas that I felt that I didn't cover well enough when I was talking in my e-course about working with brands was the legality side of things, contracts. So tell us a little bit more about the services that you offer through Businessese.
Sure. We offer DIY legal forms. Like, what we always say is probably 70% of the time, the brand is going to have a contract that they use and they'll send it over to you. Take that, because that, honestly, that's easier for you to have a base for it, unless you have a contract that you like to use. And we always say that's where we come in. And we have a sponsored content contract that you can use. And we call it sponsored content rather than sponsored blog post or sponsored video, because you can use it for everything. And depending upon how old you are, I'm probably dating myself a little bit. I was a big fan of the Choose Your Own Adventure books as a child. And I kind of look at it a little bit like that, because we have different provisions that you can choose based upon what kind of contract you have. So we're going to give you, so let's say it's a sponsored blog post. We've got a provision there. If it's a sponsored social share campaign, you've got that. Sponsored video, that's in there. We've got different types of payment provisions, because I think that a lot of times bloggers may just not know the terminology. Like, guys, if you see net 30, that means that you're going to be paid 30 days after the invoice goes out. Don't be intimidated by the legalese that may be in there. Just, if you don't know, Google it, check with me, check with anybody. We also have different provisions that are in there based on the ownership. We have what we view as the two most common, which are the you own it and the brand is licensing it, or if the brand gets all of the rights to it, that's available as well. And there's exclusivity provisions. We also walk you through how to write out your scope of work, which is what you guys have agreed to. So if you said you're going to do a blog post and 2 Instagram shares and a pin, that's the kind of thing that you have to write out. We can't really guess what that's going to be. So you really do have to know what your deliverables are. But those are the types of things that we offer in that sponsored content contracts specifically. The other things that we offer are other types of contracts that you really will need in your online business. So for example, if you're doing a long-term negotiation, you may need an NDA to start with. We have that. If you need, if you're hiring a VA, that's going to be a different type of contract. So we have that. If you're just hiring a contributor or something along those lines, we have those. For many folks in this space, I think that they lean toward the creative side for sure, which I always respect, because I'm so not. Like, without Canva, there'd be no graphics on my website. None. And so we have, if let's say you branch into doing graphic design, we have a contract that you can use with your clients. So our goal is to make it a little bit easier to find those templates that you may need, so that you can feel more comfortable that you have a legal partner. I think for a lot of businesses, when you're starting out, you may not have, depending on how much you're making, you may not have room for a line item for legal review. And we understand that. That may not be where you are in your business. But we don't want you to then feel like just because you don't have that line item yet, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't ignore the legal ever. But we want it to be accessible for people. And what I like about our contracts is once you buy it, you can use that template over and over again. You can't share it with your friends. We don't offer the license that. But once you buy it, you get a license to use it and use it over and over again with different brands. So once you make that investment, it's something that you have available. And if at some point you get to the stage where you're like, you know what, I do have my line item for legal right now, and I really want somebody to look at this and make this custom to what I do, then we can help you over on the law firm side.
Right. No, that's fabulous. And you also have a download for my audience today, right?
I do. We like to talk a lot about negotiation, because I think that so often bloggers are not comfortable doing their negotiation. And we want you to feel more comfortable. So what you can do is go to businessese.com/Jenny, or no, I'm sorry, it's businessese.com/influencer entrepreneurs. I did it after that. Yeah. And you will receive a download that is our successful negotiation blueprint. And we walk you through and give you a worksheet on the 6 stages of negotiation, because we want to make sure that you are comfortable with it. And you may not know what you need to ask during the research phase, or when you are before you ever get to the back and forth about what you are or are not keeping. So you can download that, and then we have a special discount that you'll receive in a follow-up.
That's fabulous. And you guys can also, if you go to jennymelrose.com/podcast8, you can, we have it linked right there in the show notes so that you can make sure that you get that download. So one of the last questions I always love to ask and put people on the spot about, are there projections for 2017? What do you see being a big deal in 2017?
I think that I don't want to say we're moving away from networks, because I don't think that we are. I think that networks are here to stay, and I think they're a really good resource. What I see happening more is exactly what you are teaching people, and that's the art of the direct pitch. And I think that I feel like the networks are particularly good when you are starting out, because it takes some of the fear out of doing those types of pitches, and they're handling it for you. It helps you get the experience of creating sponsored content. So once you have that experience, I think it's really good. So I think that I think that pitching is huge this year. I think I see so many influencers who are saying, this is my goal for this year, is to get like 3 campaigns, 5 campaigns that I have pitched myself. The other thing that I think is vitally important is when you are doing those campaigns, you need to have a good close report. That is, influencers who work direct with brands are pretty much the only people who skip doing a good close report. And way too often I see people who will say, I don't know what to include, so I'm just going to basically screenshot my Google Analytics. Folks, your close campaign report is pretty much the easiest secondary marketing for repeat business that you will ever have. It is, we have a mini course on campaign reporting, and somebody wrote back and said, I sent the report that you guys guided me through creating. I sent this to a brand, and they said they had never received one of these from a blogger before, and that they can't wait to work with me again. Folks, if it's that easy to get repeat business, send out that report. Then you don't have to go through the pitch. So that's the other thing that I think is really, I think that you're going to see more influencers treating themselves as businesses, which means pitch to close, and close includes reporting.
Yes. And I love that you added that, because that is one of the modules in the Working with Brands e-course, is
perfect,
just on your reporting afterwards, because it is huge. And I give them, they get their spreadsheet, they get everything that needs to be in there. Absolutely. I totally agree. That was where you were talking about that in Food Entrepreneur Summit. And that's when I said, oh my God, I need to reach out to her. She thinks just like I do.
It's one of those things where we did it for all of our clients. So the idea that influencers aren't taking advantage of that same opportunity, because like I said, you're the expert on your audience. You need to go back to that brand and say, look what we did together. Look how much my audience loved you. That's your time to shine and show your expertise so that you can get hired again. And that, beautiful. Yes. Who doesn't want repeat business? Because that takes so much work off of you from the pitch side. You've already worked with them. You already know them. It's just about creating the campaign details at that point.
Yep. It's no more one and done. Now it's an actual long-term relationship. Totally agree. Oh my goodness.
That's what so many people say they want, is these long-term brand ambassadorships. That is how you get it, is by performing like a business, show them how professional you are. It really does make a huge difference.
I totally agree. Danielle, it was so nice speaking with you. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to my audience. And I want to make sure that they all come and stop and pick up that download, because it is a ton of great information.
Thank you so much. If anyone has questions, please let me know. I love working with the influencer space for sure.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you.